Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a pretty big financial decision facing a community. We're making $150 million. And our mission here isn't just about the project itself, but this specific process they're using to get it approved. It's called the Alternative Approval Process, or AAP. Now, many of you might have heard this term, maybe seen it mentioned, but it has some, well, profound implications we need to unpack. We'll be drawing on sources that explain what this AAP is, why it's even being used for something this huge, and what it means for, democratic accountability. It might challenge some core assumptions. So let's get right into it. This $150 million question for a new operations center. And at the core, this alternative approval process, AAP. For a lot of people, I think that term is just confusing. Can you maybe break down for us, just in simple terms, what exactly is the AAP?
Yeah, absolutely. So the AP, it's basically a tool councils can use. It lets them move ahead with something big, like borrowing money long term, based on the assumption they have public consent. But, and this is a really critical part, it defines consent as, well, as silence.
Silence.
hmm
So how does that work in practice?
Well, it means the project gets approved automatically unless a specific number of people, 10% of eligible voters, which is 8,735 people in this case, actively fight against it. And that means finding a specific form, downloading it, printing it, signing it, and then physically getting it to the municipal hall by a really strict deadline. So if you don't do all that, if you stay silent, you're counted as a yes vote, not voting as a yes.
Wow. Okay, consent is silence. That's quite something for a decision this big. It really flips the usual idea of consent on its head, doesn't it? It puts this huge burden on residents to actively opt out rather than just having a clear yes or no choice. It feels like it almost discourages people from participating.
It certainly makes it harder, much harder than a simple referendum vote.
So why? Why would a council choose this route? I mean, instead of a straightforward referendum where everyone gets a clear say, what's the rationale?
The official reason they give the council majority is mainly about cost and efficiency. They point out that a full referendum, printing ballots, staffing polls, it can cost several $100,000. Whereas an AAP, well, it costs just a fraction of that, administratively speaking.
Okay, so it saves money up front.
Yes, up front. But, and this is where I think the real question lies.
Yeah.
You're talking about a 30-year loan, $150 million. This affects every taxpayer for a generation. Is saving, let's say, $200,000 or $300,000 on a referendum really worth sacrificing that clear, direct public mandate, that yes or no from the community? For me, the answer is pretty firm no. It really makes you question when efficiency stops being efficient and starts, well, eroding accountability.
That really puts it starkly, doesn't it? Trading that clear public voice for, relatively speaking, not a huge saving on a massive project. But okay, let me push back slightly. Play devil's advocate, maybe. Some people might say, look, these projects are essential. The operations center is old. Maybe that fire hall did need upgrading. Aren't these just necessary costs of running a growing community? Maybe the AAP is just a practical way to get needed things done faster.
That's a fair point. And look, nobody's arguing we don't need modern infrastructure. Of course we do. Our public works staff, everyone, deserves safe, good facilities. But that's exactly why this process feels wrong here. If a project is genuinely necessary, if it truly benefits the community, it should be able to withstand public scrutiny, right? The argument, oh, it just has to be done, shouldn't be a free pass to limit oversight.
So the need itself doesn't justify bypassing a direct vote.
Exactly. In fact, I'd argue the opposite. As an engineer, I've managed complex public projects. Transparency, getting public buy-in early, that's actually essential for keeping costs under control. It's when things happen behind closed doors or, with this kind of limited oversight like the AAP offers, that's often when budgets start to spiral out of control.
That's fascinating. So a more democratic process might actually lead to better fiscal outcomes in the long run because there's more eyes on it.
Absolutely. More scrutiny tends to keep everyone sharper, more focused on delivering value.
Okay, so this isn't just about this $150 million loan then. You mentioned earlier this AAP might be part of a larger pattern.
Yes, and I think this context is crucial for people to understand. This AAP vote is not happening in a vacuum. There's what I call a, frankly, disturbing pattern of fiscal issues we've seen recently.
Such as? What examples fit this pattern?
Well, look at the Fire Hall #2 project. The budget started at $26.6 million. Okay, maybe reasonable. But it ended up costing $44.6 million. That's an $18 million cost overrun. Just exploded.
$18 million over budget? That's huge.
Staggering. And then there was the purchase of land for the new park's operations yard. Public records clearly show the district paid $8 million over the appraised value for that land.
$8 million over appraisal.
$8 million. So you see these major issues huge cost overruns, paying significantly over assessed value. And now, right after those things, council comes forward asking for another $150 million loan, but using a process specifically designed to avoid a direct public vote. When you see that kind of pattern, the absolute last thing you should do, in my view, is just write another massive check without the highest possible level of public scrutiny. A referendum seems warranted.
It certainly paints a picture.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, as you said, if more direct oversight earlier, maybe a referendum on those projects, could have prevented some of those financial outcomes.
It's impossible to know for sure, but it certainly raises the question. More sunlight is usually a good disinfectant, financially speaking.
So, given this pattern and the concerns about the AAP, what's the path forward? What could be done differently to maybe prevent these kinds of situations, this erosion of trust perhaps from happening again? What does this mean for governance?
Well, this is where we need concrete changes. My platform, for instance, focuses on 3 core reforms to tackle this directly. First, governance reform. Simple policy. Any non-emergency borrowing over a set amount, let's say $25 million, we can debate the exact number, must automatically go to a referendum. No ifs, ands, or buts.
So take the political calculation out of it entirely. If it's big money, it's a public vote, period.
Precisely. It guarantees residents get their say on major financial commitments, no exceptions. It takes the temptation away from using processes like the AAP for huge sums.
Okay, that's governance. What else?
Second, real fiscal accountability. We need to mandate independent third-party value for money audits, not just at the end, but at key stages of every major capital project.
So checking in along the way.
Exactly. Yeah. This isn't radical. It's standard practice in many other levels of government. It means potential cost overruns or issues get flagged early when you can still do something about them, not after the money's already spent and it's too late.
Catching problems before they become those multi-million-dollar overruns? Makes sense. And the third reform.
The third is about efficiency, but maybe not in the way council thinks about it. It's about fixing the internal processes that seem to lead to these massive, often last-minute projects popping up. We need to invest seriously in a proper, long-term strategic asset management plan. Real planning, looking 20 years down the road for infrastructure needs.
So being proactive instead of reactive.
That's it, exactly. Stop reacting to crises every budget cycle and start planning proactively based on data and evidence. Move from this reactive, often politically driven process to one that's planned, evidence-based, and transparent.
Right. Proactive planning, automatic referendums for big borrowing, and independent audits. That sounds like a comprehensive approach. Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear this whole situation touches on really fundamental questions about community decision-making and money. And just to remind listeners, for those directly affected by the specific AAP in Saanich, there's a very real and very soon deadline involved, isn't there?
Yes, absolutely. The deadline to submit the AAP form is June 25th. And I really want to stress this. Your voice is powerful, but, well, only if you use it. This isn't even about being for or against the new operations center itself. People can have different views on the project need. This is purely about your fundamental right to have a direct say when it comes to a $150 million decision that impacts everyone for decades.
So it's about the process, not necessarily the project outcome.
Exactly. It's about the principle of direct democracy on major spending. So I really urge residents, get informed. You can go to med4saanich.com. That's MED, the number 4, saanich.com. We've put up a direct link there to the official AAP elector response form. And there's also a simple guide on how to fill it out and, crucially, how and where to submit it by that June 25th deadline. Honestly, it takes maybe 5 minutes to download, print, sign that form, and figure out how to drop it off. 5 minutes. But submitting that form sends a really powerful message to the council. It says, on decisions this big, we demand a real vote. Let's bring accountability back to these major financial commitments.
A clear call to action there. med4saanich.com for the form and guide. Deadline June 25th. And it leaves us all, I think, with a final thought to chew on. This deep dive into Saanich's alternative approval process really makes you ask, where else might similar processes, maybe under different names, be playing out in our own communities? Where else might public consent be defined not by a clear voice, but, well, by silence? And what's the true cost of that silence? Not just in dollars and cents, but in the long-term currency of public trust and good governance. Something to think about.